Welcome back. It's still this morning on ITV, and it's time for us to look at the incessant building collapse in Nigeria, in so many states in the country. I have with me an engineer in the house who is going to discuss this issue with us. We really need to know what are the causes of building collapse in Nigeria, and of course, what are the solutions that can be offered to see how we can reduce this disaster, because we know so many states in the country experience this, Lagos State being the lead among other states experiencing this disaster. So I have with me in the studio engineer Dominic Akubo. He is the former chairman, Nigerian Institution of Civil Engineering Abuja chapter. He's standing in for the current president, the Council for the Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria, COREN, Engineer A.A. Rabiu, who is the president of the council. You're welcome to the program, sir.
Good morning, and thank you for having me, ma.
Okay, so the building collapse in Nigeria has been a major concern for Nigerians. We hear stories, we see stories, we hear how people die in such disaster, and it's been like that for years. Of course, there must be causes why such are happening. So can you share your thoughts on what you think are the causes of building collapse in Nigeria?
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. I am representing Engineer A.A. Rabiu, a fellow of the Nigerian Society of Engineers, in discussing this matter. He is the president of the Council for the Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria. Building collapse is an engineering catastrophe. It is not peculiar to Nigeria alone. We need to know that. However, the frequency of occurrence in recent times is alarming, and it has become a challenge to the engineering profession in general. To start with, I think we need to start with some facts. Between 1974 and to date, we've had occurrences of over 320 building collapses in Nigeria, out of which over 1,350 minimum deaths have been recorded. Not to talk about the injuries, not to talk about the loss of investments, properties worth billions of naira. We will actually look at the causes, and the causes are multifaceted. Why did I say so? Now, we have some of those buildings that usually collapse in coastal cities like Lagos. These buildings actually predate the independence and the colonial era. They have actually outlived their useful life. Usually when structural integrity tests are conducted, these buildings are marked as distressed buildings. But the major problem has been the political will to bring these buildings down. And I'm sure as we progress, we're going to mention some other causes of the building collapse, ranging from ineffective supervision, use of substandard materials, and so on and so forth. But by way of introduction, please permit me to stop here so that you talk more.
No problem. Okay, just talking about the supervision that you talk about, because I know before any structure comes up, there must be some stages you pass through in building, and definitely you must have some regulatory bodies that has to check the different stages of building. So what do you think are the functions of these regulatory bodies, and do you think they are doing much? Because if this has been going on well, like the way we expect it, then definitely we shouldn't be having such disasters as much as we're having it now.
Okay, please permit me, before I talk about supervision, to give you a brief overview of COREN.
Okay.
COREN was established by virtue of Decree 55 of 1970, which was now later reviewed by Decree number 27 of 1992. And then in 2004 also, laws of the Engineers Registration Act, LFN, Cap E11. And finally, in 2018, we now have the Engineers Registration Amendment Act number 3, 2018. Now, this recent amendment has given COREN far-reaching powers. The powers include the power of regulation, control, and enforcement. By virtue of Section 21I of this COREN Act 2018, COREN can now assess sites and perform their oversight function of inspection, even without prior invitation or prior notice. Okay. But prior to that time, there have been several challenges that prevents COREN from doing that. Don't forget that part of the causes of building collapse is the patronage of quacks and professional quacks. These are two different terminologies. When you talk about quacks, you're talking about people who do not have the formal training of engineering, that are practicing engineering and have designated themselves as engineering professionals and engineers in our sites. And when you talk about professional quacks, you're talking about engineers who are practicing outside their areas of core competence, rather than synergizing with people who have experience in that field to build capacity. So these are two different things. From the statistics I've just given you, usually there are panels when a building actually collapses. We don't just rush to go and make comments. There are procedures to follow, because this is engineering and then this is science. It has to be backed up with scientifically proven evidence. So at the end of the day, reports are produced, and then most of the causes is actually about 6 of them. Use of substandard materials. Okay. Then illegal addition of flaws. You agree with me that in those days and even now, one of the measures of wealth is the number of floors you have in your buildings. So you find out that people try to increase the number of floors they have without due recourse to the bearing capacity of the soil and the adequacy of the foundation to carry this additional load. And you find out that they won't even revert to the approving authorities to ascertain whether they can proceed or not. We also have the use of substandard materials that is triggered by the increase in construction materials, including cement. There is no reason why cement should cost more than 4,000 or more than 3,000 naira in Nigeria, because 90% of the raw materials for producing cement is sourced locally in Nigeria. Even the reinforcement rods, I'm going to link this up with the supervision, because if you're supervising against some set standards. For instance, the reinforcement rods, if you are recommended to use Y16, for instance, 16 mm, you find out that what you get in the market may not be up to that 16 mm. So these are also part of the reasons why incessant building collapse actually persists. But there is a way around it, and there are solutions. But let me still give you time to still ask more questions.
Okay, so still on the supervision, if we have the body, like you said, are they doing enough? Because if they are doing enough, then we shouldn't be having issues like this. What are those things the supervisory body for building, the engineering council, what are they doing to assure us that as each building, because you said sometimes you don't even need permission to go, you just see a structure, you go there to investigate. Sure. So if you go there to investigate at your own time, which means you can actually discover some flaws, along the line. What are those actions, what are those things the body, are expected to do to bring this to forth?
Okay, thank you so much. The new current act, with the new current act now, current now has an engineering regulation and monitoring department as a full-fledged department. And it is cascaded to different states where we have state technical committees. They have been inaugurated as we speak. Over 14 of them have been inaugurated. Okay. In doing so, we go into partnership with the Nigerian Society of Engineers so that we use qualified personnel in this supervision. So most times, the steps taken are proactive. You don't get to hear them because they don't make noise about it. Because just like I said, this is purely technical. Whenever there are issues of building collapse, professional bodies need not just rush to make statements, because at that point, the priority is to save lives. And then investigation will reveal the causes, and then profile recommendations with the view to ensuring that these circumstances are averted or prevented in the future. Now, Koren has also been given the powers of enforcement. Okay. Prior to 2018, if you are a quack and you are found wanting in the supervision of a failed building, it was difficult for Koren to prosecute you. So what Koren did then was that they had an MOU with ICPC so that you get prosecuted. But right now, the Koren Act has empowered Koren to prosecute practitioners of engineering. It means even if you are not a trained engineer and you engage in the practice of engineering, you can be prosecuted. If you are an engineer, you have to face the tribunal. If you are a non-engineer, you will be prosecuted in a court of competent jurisdiction. In trying to ascertain what actually led to building collapses, Koren works with several bodies, including the Nigerian Building and Road Research Institutes. They've actually conducted substantial investigation into most of these building collapses, and they have published technical reports. Technical report number 24, number 45, number 58, name them, and they are even available in the public domain if you want to purchase them. Yes,
okay, so talking about the unqualified builders, don't you have a way of making people, being a part of the council, being a member, because you can't just be a builder or an engineer without being a member of the council, the Engineering Council of Nigeria. So how can you differentiate, a qualified engineer from unskilled and an unskilled engineer?
Okay, thank you very much for asking the question. Now we have different categories of registration in Koren. The first is engineer. That's those who went through the formal training. And we have over 62,000 of them that are registered as of today. Then we have the technologists. We have over 6,500 of them as we speak. Then we have the technicians. We have more than 2,000 of them as we speak. And then we have the craftsmen. So you see, there is a signage between these different categories. So for those who practice as quacks or something similar, we try to get them together under craftsmen or technicians and try to have capacity building for them and integrate them. But this is Nigeria. Enforcement and regulation, it's not an easy thing, but regulatory bodies such as Koren should not give up. They should continue to up their game, and the professional bodies are also complementing in the areas of capacity building. But what we advocate is that all professionals of the built environment should come together, because there seem to be what I will refer to as superiority contests between the different professional bodies, especially if it has to do with buildings. So I think they all need one another. They should come together to the drawing board. An engineer is as important as the architect. The architect is as important as the builder. Yes. So if the problem of building collapse is to be solved and on a sustainable basis, everybody has to be on the table. But the challenges are not insurmountable. They are.
Okay, so for us to have a solid building, a solid structure, there are stages where, phases of building that we have to pass through to get to that solid structure that we can now call a home or a building or a house. Okay, so can you mention the stages of building for us, sir?
Okay, we have the design stage, planning and the design stage. And then let's say a contract is now awarded, and then you have the execution stage, and then you have the completion stage. For the sake of our viewers, I have decided to categorize it this way. Now, the planning and design stage, when the building is designed, you have to go for approval with the relevant approving authorities, depending on the state where you are. For instance, in Abuja, Development Control takes care of that. So your building is subjected to vetting to be sure that the relevant professionals have actually done their drawings. For instance, you have architectural drawings to be done by an architect. You have structural drawings to be done by civil structural engineer. Mind you, the civil engineering family is a very big family with so many branches: structures, water, environment. Then you also have the electrical design. Then you also have the plumbing and mechanical design. So they will need to vet it, and at the end of the day, if it satisfies safety requirements, it is approved. Now that it is approved doesn't mean that you're going to start construction from beginning to end. There are going to be some oversight functions at different stages. At the foundation stage, they're going to check it and then give you clearance to go to the next stage. As a matter of fact, even when the building is completed or during the execution of the project, there are going to be checks to ensure that it is only qualified and competent engineers that are supervising that work under ideal conditions. And when a building is completed, you don't just go and occupy that building. Under ideal conditions, the approving authority is supposed to come and assess what you've completed, and then compare it to the approval that you got, and then issue a certificate of fitness for occupation. That is when and only when human life are supposed to actually go into that building.
Yes. Okay, talking about comparing approvals, of buildings? Because I know before you start a building, you must have submitted a number of story you want to build.
Definitely.
And of course, the approval must have been gotten, and you start building.
Definitely.
Are there no time where the body goes to check if the approval, that was given was actually made? Because sometimes you get to see some of all these owners going to increase the story building that was approved. Okay, look at the story of Lagos State. When the 21-story building, I remember I heard it was about 15-story building that was approved, and there was additional like 6-story building on it. So at what time, because you said they check, at what time, because I know if it's constant checking, then there should have been a time to stop, such process once you discover the person is going out of the approved, building structure or buildings, the story buildings, that the body must have approved for the person.
Okay, thank you very much for bringing that case study up. It's a case study that we are familiar with, and a comprehensive report has been produced. There was a stop work order on that particular project. Unfortunately, so many people died. We commiserate with their families. We commiserate with the government of Lagos State. But the truth must be told. There was a stop work order at some point, and even the supervisory consultant had to write to pull out at some point. But for us, writing to pull out is not enough. In that kind of correspondence, the regulatory body should have been copied to know that the supervisory engineer is pulling out, and the reasons clearly stated. Fine, it has been written to the client, but the regulatory body should also have been copied. So there was actually a stop work order. But let's try to be transparent. The owner of that building was powerful within that circle.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm being very realistic. Was powerful within that circle. Unfortunately, he was also one of the victims of that unfortunate incident. So we advise that the outcome of this kind of investigation should be made public, and there should be no sacred cows, so that it will serve as a deterrent for others who want to toe the same path, and also a lesson for all engineers and practitioners of engineering to also learn. I think they are avoidable. It's an avoidable situation.
Okay, so I'm still talking about someone be powerful owning a building and cannot, cannot be prosecuted. I think we're still going to find time to talk about prosecution of people, culprits, that go against approved structure for their project. Okay, so at this time we'll take a short break and be back to continue with the program.
Thank you.
Welcome back. We're still here talking about incessant building collapse in Nigeria. And before we went for that break, I was talking about prosecution of culprits, that got approved story for their structure for their projects, and they went ahead to build something different. So what are those things? What are those measures that have been taken against such persons?
Okay, thank you very much. Before I mention the issue of prosecution, just to remind our viewers that if you own a property and that building collapses, by virtue of the laws that we have in most states, that land ceases to be your land. It becomes a government land, because the government will take over your land. So you have to ensure that you patronize the relevant professionals, not just to try to save costs, but have the safety of the end users in mind. Having said that, there have been cases that have been tried, and some engineers have appeared before the current tribunal. Some of them are cooling off in jail now as a result of the breach and of our professional code of ethics and their role in such instances. But actually, from most of this investigation, not very many engineers have been involved. But we have engineers who have been prosecuted, and some have been jailed. And those records are available in Koren. Some investigations are still going on. Some people have been invited, especially the collapse that happened during the year in Enugu, especially the pedestrian bridge, I think last year. Some cases are still under investigation. And Koren is actually working assiduously with the Ministry of Justice in this regard.
Okay, so still talking about prosecution of people that go against approved structure, in what area do you think the body can improve upon their monitoring? Because we hear even the monitoring are not so effective like that, even though they still do a bit of it. Or in what area can they improve their monitoring, so we can, put an end to some of all these disasters that we get to see?
Okay, thank you. That's coming from you. Just like I told you, the new Current Act has actually given Current some far-reaching powers. And the council, which comprises of all stakeholders, is actually not resting on its oars. They are leveraging on these opportunities that have been created by the new Current Act to ensure that all necessary steps are taken. And I told you about the ERM, Engineering Regulation and Monitoring Committee. We have them in all states of the Federation. We are recommissioning them, and it has been recommissioned in more than 14 different states. So these and many more are some of the steps that Current is taking. Perhaps Current will need to be doing a lot of enlightenment campaign and awareness of how it is leveraging on those opportunities that have been created or those powers that have been given to it by the recent act, so that the public is also aware of what Current is doing behind the scene to prevent these cases of incessant building collapse even before they occur.
Okay, so taking the Lagos 21-story building that happened, recently into consideration, do you have anything you can enlighten the public about, that would have prevented that? That should have been taken into consideration to have avoided that disaster in Lagos?
Okay, it's a case that is yet to be finally concluded. So I'm mindful of what I say, but I've also gone through the reports, investigative reports. And from what I have read, the advice to the clients is to please patronize the services of professionals and also listen to their advice. And if in doubt of any advice issued to you by a professional, please get another professional, okay? Get a second opinion, or get the regulatory body also involved. Secondly, please do not modify your building without due approval, because your building was approved based on the geotechnical investigation that was carried out on the soil and the strength of the soil. So the carrying capacity of the soil had been established on the basis for which you were given an approval for a certain number of floors. If you have to increase, or you have the intention of increasing the capacity of a building in terms of the number of floors, please revert back to the professionals as well as the approving authorities, so that they will do the needful and give you recommendations that are safe and sustainable. Then clients should please try to put safety above cost saving, because some of these incessant building collapses are attributable to the client's penchant to save costs, or the contractor's penchant to maximize profits.
Okay, is there no way the body can, the council and the engineering council, is there no way they can actually make a law and enforce it to be sure that only professionals, skilled professionals that would handle building, process in every project that comes, even in every state in the country, is there a way the body can actually do that to ensure that they check professionals to be on ground, to be the one building?
That's actually the core mandate of Current. In fact, it even extends beyond that. It's also the mandate of Current to ensure that only registered engineers head engineering departments and units. It's also the mandate of Current to ensure that only registered and qualified engineers execute projects. It's also the mandate of Current to ensure that even the contractors and consultants are those that are qualified and duly registered. It is also the mandate of Current to ensure that when you have to bring an expatriate, the expatriate is also registered with Current. And that the reason why you are bringing the expatriate is because you don't have a local content in terms of skill. There is a skill gap. And even when you bring that expatriates, they have to be indigenous engineers to understudy that expatriate. So we have it. And then the new Current Act has also empowered Current to enact regulations without reverting to external parties. And these are the opportunities that the council is leveraging on. Okay. I can assure you they are working on them.
Okay, we're hoping to see more and more of that. Okay, so in all of this, what are your final words to Nigerians, to builders, to people with projects, intending to build, for safety, of course, putting the safety of people into consideration?
Okay, to viewers out there and to professionals, life is precious. Life is very precious. Please patronize the services of professionals, engineers, architects, and members of the built environment. That will help us in saving lives. That will help us in preventing the incessant cases of building collapse. To regulators such as the Standard Organization of Nigeria, they have been out of our ports for more than 10 years because of reasons such as ease of doing business. To the government, I think the government need to have a second look at that, because some of these construction materials that are imported actually need to be checked at the point of entry. Okay. To the engineering profession, the professional bodies, please intensify your efforts in getting codes and standards for our various areas of practice, and then to domesticate even the foreign codes that we have, because our region has its own peculiarities. So basically, these are my last words for our viewers and for our professionals.
Okay, permit me to ask you to talk more about what government needs to do, because it was supposed to be part of what we're supposed to discuss. What should government do to help this situation in the country?
Okay, one of the things that government can actually do is to create the enabling environment for engineers and qualified people who wish to set up material testing laboratories to do so. Because construction works are going on everywhere.
Yes.
And the cases of building collapse is rampant in Lagos and Abuja, with Lagos accounting for over 58%, and then Abuja 65% because of the propensity for vertical development and rural-urban migration. So the government can actually create the enabling environment for the setting up of these material testing laboratories. And it should be made mandatory in such a way that even when you acquire those materials, before you use them on site, they should be tested. Just like I told you, the 16 mm rod in the market may end up not actually being 16 mm. Yes. The 12 mm may not be 12 mm. Then the cement. What are the conditions of storage of our cement? Cement is a hygroscopic substance. Therefore, its storage requires that it has to be airtight and waterproof. So there are so many other engineering construction materials that need to be tested before they are used. So the government can help in this regard. Okay,
on that I want to say a very big thank you to Engineer Dominic Akubo, the former chairman, Nigerian Institution of Civil Engineers, Abuja chapter. Thank you so much for coming on the program. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on the topic.
Thank you, Ma. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, same here. And on that, we'll take a short break and be back to continue with the program.